Hello, BAML family. We want to bring you an announcement about our regathering plans and share with you some of our rationale for why we have come with the plans that we have. And so we want to take a few minutes together as a ministry team to share those with you. First of all, let me just kind of point out something that I think we all are very aware of. It feels like we are in very polarized times. Everyone has an opinion. And the opinions vary across the gamut of all of the issues that face our country now. And our regathering is not unique in that regard. People have varying opinions about that. Some believe that we should have been meeting weeks ago with the doors wide open. Others believe that we probably should not regather yet because of the virus. And so within the midst of that is our BAML body. And so we want to address the issues realizing that there are a variety of opinions about what is the best and the safest and the correct way of moving forward. So let me kind of jump into some of what we are thinking about doing and planning, and we'll talk about that together. So we are going to plan on regathering on September 13th at 10 a.m. right here in the chapel. And I know the first question, and a very valid question, is why the chapel and not the worship center? And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, the worship center is large and it feels like we can safely distance within that room. And that really is true. That is a very good argument for meeting within the worship center. But the reality of it is that the worship center, because of its size, with a smaller number of people, can be problematic. We can kind of get lost. We may not really feel the connectivity that we're looking for as we're spread out over that large room. And the second thing is that we believe that as we gather together in a smaller number, that our worship experience probably will not be as uplifting and edifying to one another as we would like it to be. Certainly it's our offering to the Lord, but we also think about what it does for those who are gathered with us.
When you also look at the worship center, you're thinking, we open the doors, everyone comes in, but we do need to safeguard with the amount of people who are gathering in one place for an extended period of time. So having 200-300 people in one place for an hour or so is probably not the safest thing that we want to do for our body based on what the medical professionals are pretty much telling us right now.
That's right. That's right. And so there are those limits, and we're hopeful that all of that will change as we move forward, but that is where we are currently. The other thing that is a problem within the worship center is the fact that we have fixed seating. We have pews, and even though those can be long pews, and it feels like we could get a lot of people on a pew, the reality of it is we can't. You can really only seat at the end of a pew, and then you're seating with alternating pews. And so it is a little bit of a problem in terms of really having that feeling of I'm together with my church family. The beauty of the chapel is that we have chairs that we can arrange and move around according to our seating arrangement. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Bobby, you had mentioned the worship experience. So when we come together to worship, we are worshiping to glorify the Lord, but we also want to come away feeling as though we have been drawn closer to the throne of God. And singing is a part of our worship time. And when you're in that worship center, if you picture that worship center, it is a pretty big, cavernous place. So when you have a small group of people spaced out, socially distant from each other, the singing is not going to sound like we remember it sounding. And for me, it's not going to feel the way that I remember it feeling. And in the chapel here, we have a place that is acoustically designed to be glorious. It sounds beautiful in here when even a few are gathered and singing praises in here.
That's right. That's right. And if you have not been in this chapel to worship, it will be an experience unlike what you've probably experienced before. It is a room very much designed for that. And so those are the reasons that we are looking at the chapel to meet together again. Our limitation, though, is the size. And so even though that feels like that's problematic, to your point, Sean, it really is not at this stage in the game. That really is a desirable thing to cap the number of people meeting at any one given time. And so we understand that feels limiting, but know that we're going to be able to offer multiple services to allow for us to gather. As soon as the demand comes up, we want to open that up as a potential. So we're going to use an RSVP system, a reservation system, like what we did back in June. And I know that I've heard comments that people would say, well, out of the kindness of my heart, I don't want to take someone else's seat. I'm going to say, don't worry about that. Go ahead, let us know you want to be here. If our demand is higher than what we can provide in a single service, we'll add multiple services, and we will do that very quickly. So please let us know that you would like to be here. Those are all the things that we are considering as we move forward. So let's talk a little bit about what it is involved in meeting together. Things that maybe sometimes we don't think about that are kind of behind the scenes, but are nevertheless part of what we do when we do gather. One of those things that we are known for at BAML, one of the things that is a very much a part of our DNA is our hospitality. And so, Michael, do you want to address that a little bit?
Absolutely. Fellowship and hospitality is so important to BAML Church. It's really in our spiritual DNA. But we want to keep people safe. We also want to respect people and how they're doing with the COVID virus. And so hospitality is going to look different in regard to affection. So there probably aren't going to be the handshakes and the hugs that you're accustomed to. But developing that momentum of being around each other and seeing each other is really important. And we know that there's a thirst for fellowship, and we want to lean into that. And it's so important, as you said earlier, that people RSVP. We get people here and around each other and used to being with each other for worship. It's just so vitally important. But fellowship, specifically hospitality, is going to look different.
And that kind of goes back to the polarization you were talking about earlier, Bobby, of, in conversations that we've all had with people here at BAML, the shepherds, who are really having a lot of conversations with people. I mean, there are so many who are really safeguarded, but wanting to come back to a safe place. But the physical contact, those close encounters that makes us who we are in hospitality is really people are nervous about and really apprehensive to coming back for. And so I think we all, as a hugger myself, we need to be very mindful of how we are keeping distance from one another during this process to make sure everybody is comfortable and coming back to a safe worship environment.
That's so true. And Michael, you were talking about your hospitality team. One of the things that also plays into it is the number of people who you utilize on a given Sunday. Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
On any given Sunday, we have 15 to 25 people practicing the art of hospitality, engaging people, drawing people in. And so that number has been greatly reduced. And we're having to rely more and more upon our leaders and their spouses to provide that hospitality touch, which will look different. And so we're asking for grace and for patience as we navigate this.
Good. And speaking of another hallmark of our gathering together, particularly as it relates to our Sundays, are our children and youth. And so we don't want to not attend to them. And so, Tabitha, do you want to share a little bit about what our plans are to address our children?
Absolutely. So for our children, as you all know, over the last several months, you've had a chance to worship together as a family. You've gotten to experience that. And those times are invaluable, that family worship time together. But I do recognize that our kids are missing out on having age-appropriate lessons delivered to them in an environment with their peers, something that they can really get out of it. And so I definitely want to be able to provide that for our families here, for our kids here, but we're going to do that in a safe way. So we're going to start with kind of a phased approach. If you're coming here on Sundays to regather in the chapel, we will have a children's worship going on at the same time. Now we're going to start with elementary aged kids. We'll add on those preschool ages later. It's a little bit easier with our elementary ages to enforce the social distancing. If anyone's ever been around a preschooler, you know that they have a hard time keeping their hands off of all the things and off of each other. So until we set a rhythm with our elementary age kids and we feel comfortable adding on that preschool age, we're going to start with just our elementary ages, but there will be a worship option available for them, age-appropriate lessons delivered to them where they can be with their peers. Now, for those of you who do have younger ones, I don't want to leave you out just because we're building a phased approach. If you come here on Sunday with your younger ones, we do have activity bags that are available just for them. We also have a room that'll be opened up for you to use. It's a room off the back of the chapel where you can still hear what's going on. But if you need to take your young one in there just to stretch their legs, it's a small playroom, and let them play a little bit and get some of those wiggles out. Or if you need to go change a diaper, there's a room back there that you can use. Now, when we think about children's ministry, sometimes we think about, oh, when are we going to get back to normal? And everything nowadays, when you say normal, it's always in quotation marks. But if you think pre-COVID with the children's ministry, when you came in, you may not realize this, but on any given Sunday with children's ministry, there were 45 to 55 people volunteering and serving in children's ministry on any given Sunday. Now, that's a lot of volunteers. And a lot of our volunteers fall into the age range that they probably should be a little bit more cautious before coming to regather again. So as we start building those phases, as we start adding on options for our kids, and we'll add on a preschool age worship later on, we do want to be mindful of the number of volunteers we will have available. And we want to make sure that we are keeping things safe for our kids, for your families, because they're coming home to you, and maybe you're going to visit grandparents over the weekend. But we also want to keep things safe for our volunteers as well.
And very similar with the youth group. I mean, we were able to meet for about 3 weeks in June, just like we were when we had the service in the chapel. But for going on about maybe 3 or 4 months now, our youth group hasn't been able to be together in person in fellowship. And outside of some small group engagements that are organically taking place amongst teens because they are close in relationship, the teens are desiring to be together in person. And I've been here almost 5.5 years and working with the youth group. And the constant thing I always hear is you just got to get the teens together. They always want to be together. And many of our teens are struggling, just like many of us are, and not having those in-person gatherings, those relationships. And so we are also going to have a youth group worship during the time of the adult worship that's going to be in the chapel. And we're going to meet in the teen center. Sometimes we'll meet outside of the pavilion because God has really blessed us with a great campus with a lot of space that not a lot of churches have. So we want to take advantage of that as well. So we're hoping for the teens to have a fellowship opportunity to reconnect and really start to build some momentum in a small step approach and really getting our families back here on campus. So the hope is that if you're coming for the worship service here in the chapel, your teens and your children have an opportunity for some fellowship and some spiritual formation.
Which also reduces the number. If we have a cap of number of people we can have here in the chapel, having our elementary age kids have their own worship time and our teens to have their own worship time, that does free up some space in the chapel.
Absolutely.
That's so true. That is so true. One of the things that I think that really will be important for all of us is to manage our expectations. We're starting off in a way, and Tabitha, I think you alluded to this, that is a tiered process, a transition. We don't anticipate being in the chapel forever. This is a starting point, and we want to build on that to where we ultimately can be back in the worship center. We want to have our youth ministry in full force. We want hospitality to be like it once was. We want the children to have all of those volunteers loving on our kids. Those are all things that we're looking forward to. But again, we do have to manage our expectations. One thing that we have pretty consistently found in conversations with various other ministers, shepherds at varying congregations, and things that we have read across the country as it relates to faith communities is a tremendous reduction in the number of people who were returning following COVID. And so it's important to understand that not everyone will be here. Again, that goes back to the varying positions that we all have. And so managing expectations in regards to our numbers, I believe, is important. And I think it's also important to remember that our worship experience, even in a great room like this, will be different. We'll be wearing masks. We'll be distanced. We will be doing things, Michael, like you alluded to, which is not being in close physical contact with each other like what we're used to. And so all of those expectations need to be managed.
Yeah, and I think it's good to say that, the 5 months of conversations that our shepherds have led, our ministers have had in regards to, it can be very disappointing, right? But I also want to stress that we're also disappointed in that disappointment because we are a body. And so as a leader, we're going to disappoint with decisions that are being made, but we join in that disappointment because we want things to be back to where they are. But I think in this season, the sooner we can embrace that God is leading us to something versus going back to something. I think it's very important, and has been a healthy discussion for us through the course of time that we've wrestled through that God is leading us to something. So we want to join the church, and we want the church to join us in that process. And what is God calling us to as a congregation?
That is so good. And one thing that you alluded to there as well, Sean, is the fact that there will be people who are disappointed. I mean, we have felt that disappointment too, but we can also look at it as an opportunity for growth. Here are things that can be different. Here are ways we can change. And sometimes we look at change in a negative way, but it does not have to be that way at all. It just feels like we really need to be giving and extending a lot of grace to one another as we move forward into this. I think it is also really important to know that if you're not comfortable being back yet, that's okay. We're fine with that. Our online worship will continue to stream at 9 o'clock, just like it has been doing ever since March. And we are going to continue to try to make that a productive offering, a time that really within your home, within your backyard, maybe with some neighbors or friends, that can be a time where you guys can join together and worship our Lord together via the technology. And so we're very, very thankful for that, and we will continue on with that. Well, as we close, we talked about grace. Michael, do you want to just address that? You've shared about that before.
Absolutely. Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 2, it is by grace that you've been saved. And as a ministry team and as a leadership, we need your grace. There hasn't been a manual for how to navigate what we're going through, but we need your patience and we need your grace. And again, Apostle Paul says in Galatians chapter 5, says the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. So love, grace, and patience, we need that in abundance as we navigate these challenging times.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. We hope this has been helpful, and we look forward to being able to see many of you again on campus together.